Good evening, everyone. My name is John Cunningham. I'm a member of the Edwardsville Equality and Race Relations Committee. There are 4 members on the committee: Mayor Hal Patton, Jean O'Brien, and Brittany Johnson. After I read our mission statement, you'll be hearing from Brittany and Jean, telling you a little something about themselves. I am president of the Edwardsville NAACP. I'm a retired educator. The committee's mission, there are 3 parts. Number 1, to listen to Edwardsville residents, employees, and owners of Edwardsville businesses and other interested parties to identify racial inequities in policies, procedures, and/or the systemic implementation within city administration of services or within other aspects of our community, and recommend appropriate corrections to improve equality for all. 2, to encourage and assist with the implementation of anti-racism education programs within our community and schools, and to educate our community on the realities of racism and its remedies. 3, to increase resident engagement in community equality activities at all levels of political participation and develop a permanent committee to oversee the city's implementation of equality recommendations, reevaluate and address ongoing inequities, and continue to implement educational programming. And I indeed must say that's a mouthful. At this time, I'm going to allow and request that Ms. Brittany Johnson unmute herself and say a little about who she is.
Thank you, John. As he said, my name is Brittany Johnson. I am the editor of the Edwardsville Intelligencer. I've been editor with the newspaper here in town since October 2018. Before that, I spent some years at the Alton Telegraph there in downtown Alton as a deputy editor. Thank you.
Good evening, Jean.
Good evening, John. I'm Jean McGurk O'Brien. I am a mental health counselor at New Leaf Counseling, and I focus on trauma and relationship issues. I'm happy to be able to be part of this and hear what it is that we need to be doing.
Thank you, Jean. I'm Mayor Hal Patton, and I'm excited to be here tonight. We have right now 63 attendees for this. This is the second of our public session forums where we are listening to the public and getting recommendations, learning about their experiences. Our goal is to summarize these experiences as a committee and give recommendations to the City Council as needed to improve public policy and improve relations. The third meeting will also be a citizen meeting. We have plans to meet with clergy and churches in the future, as well as business organizations, and then realtors and developers. So right now, that's the direction that we plan on going. We are going to run this meeting this evening very similar to the way we run city council meetings in terms of public comment. For those of you who haven't been to a city council meeting to see that, we're not going to have a time limit of 3 minutes, but we're going to suggest to try to keep your comments and suggestions to that 3 to 5 minute range, just so we can allow as many people to participate as possible. Also, the decorum of this meeting is similar. When we have our public meetings, this information is going to be recorded and it will be accessible to anyone who requests the tape. We also recommend or suggest that, there's no personal accusations or attacks against personal individuals. That's not a format for that. And also, no cursing or any behavior of that regard. If so, Devin, our IT director, will be shutting down that feed. But right now, that's the only question that I see that's in written form. Other than that, we're just going to open it up. I think Devin told me the way it works is if you raise your hand, you have a comment or a suggestion, you'll pop up on our screen, and then he will bring that person to everyone's attention. And when you're speaking, everybody, all the 65 now attendees will be hearing your position. Okay?
Okay, we have our first guest speaker, Caryn Mefford. I will unmute you and allow you to talk. Feel free to start.
Okay. Hi. Thank you to the committee for hosting this, and this is such important work. My main question was whether the city and community and all of these influential institutions in our community, like obviously police, I appreciated the comments the statements that the chief of police made. But my main question is to have a unilateral, true equity mission statement for our community that is embodied at every level of leadership, both in the municipal realm and also school districts, et cetera, business communities, so on and so forth. And thank you again for holding this forum.
Thank you. Next, we have the call sign is Steve. So Steve, I will allow you to speak. You may start. Steve, I believe you are muted. Steve, I show you as muted. I'll give you a few more seconds before we move on. Okay, we will move on. Mary Grose, you will be next. You may speak.
Hi, I'm Mary Grose. I'm a resident in Ward 1. And my question maybe will be treated in the next session, but it's about housing and whether there are any obstacles for African Americans to rent, own houses, in any way. Are there obstacles in achieving those goals in Edwardsville? So if that's something that will be taken up next session, then that would be great. And I also appreciate this forum. Thank you.
Would any of the panelists like to address that? Okay. Mary, I will tell you that that question is on our questionnaire, and we are getting a moderate percentage of concern in regards to affordable housing. So that is something that we plan on asking the developers and the realtors what kind of opportunities and obstacles, as you mentioned, exist in that arena. So definitely it's getting marks of that would be higher in concern than some of the other questions we asked. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a follow-up to that. How do you see our present housing situation? Do we have opportunities for low-income housing? Are there structures up in the city now that are able to be bought, rent, or leased by people who may be of moderate or low income?
If that question is for me, John, I would basically say that Edwardsville has a wide variety of housing types. We have an older area of town that would be more of your starter homes for young families, more affordable ownership and potential lease or rent rates. And then we have the high-end subdivisions on the other side of town where you're talking 500 to 600,000, which are not very accessible. The positive that we've seen, we've been working on is making sure that our rental housing is of high quality. When I first became mayor, I took a trip to 2 or 3 different rental homes and was just astonished at the poor condition. Literally holes in the ceiling with tree limbs coming through, buckets to catch the water underneath those limbs. The renter was afraid to talk to the landlord about it for fear that they would be kicked out of that housing. We had electrical outlets exposed in basements right above children's beds that were in the basements, and in many cases difficulty evacuating some of those basements because of small windows and high windows. So we took on a very aggressive rental registration program, and we have been in those homes and in those rentals now. We keep those up to a high standard so that everybody has fair and decent housing. In terms of costs, we don't particularly have any structure within the city where we can establish a cost level. It's pretty much, private ownership and renters that have the ability to charge whatever rent they think they can get. I know that I've heard some communities want to establish a ceiling. I think it's in California or possibly Washington State. That I'm not sure about the constitutionality. But other than that, we have also increased the number of rental apartments. The student housing complexes going in brought a lot of students from neighborhoods and from some of our older rental units into those newer student housing, which made more rooms available and a more competitive environment for better rent. So I think those are questions, and those are answers I'd like to get from realtors and the developers. And hopefully, maybe even on this line, we have some individuals who have sought out affordable housing and have some experiences pro and con. Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Mr. and Mrs. Lott. I will allow them to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
My question is in regards to housing, and if when talking to realtors or people who are African-American people who are looking to buy homes in Edwardsville, are they being shown a wide range of homes? Are they only being shown homes in certain areas or in certain price ranges? Because I think we have to be aware of those issues as well, not just the issue of low-income housing.
Mhm.
And I think as part of that, if we're going to ask folks to look into it more than just the realtors and the developers, we need to maybe an outside demographer or whatever you'd call it that would that knows how to look into patterns of racial inequality.
Thank you for your question. Would any of the committee like to reply?
Devin, I would simply let the commenters know that we are taking notes and we are appreciating this input. That's exactly the questions that we need to have to move forward with these different organizations and bringing in other specialists that will look at demographics and different areas and the impact of cost of housing versus opportunity for housing. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Carroll, you are next. Go ahead and speak. You are muted now, so please unmute.
Hi, my name is Carol Gert. I've lived in Edwardsville for pretty much my whole life. I graduated Edwardsville High School. My concern is for the curriculum in our District 7, particularly concerning history and the interpretation of history and the understanding of history, especially as it relates to African Americans. I'm wondering, do you have a agenda for this? Are people working on this? I feel it probably needs to be revised to be more inclusive of African American history. So I'm curious as to what you have in mind, if anything.
I'm going to direct that to two of our panelists because I know that John Cunningham was in education in Alton for most of his career. And then Brittany, we talked about using the newspaper for educational opportunities as well in terms of African-American contributions and history impact. So if you guys would take this up, I know that there are many District 7 individuals that are listening today, and we are going to share this information with Superintendent Henderson. But we did have some discussion on this, so if the other panel members would like to take that, I would appreciate it.
Brittany, would you like to go first, or you like me to go ahead? You got to unmute.
Thank you. So as a news outlet, an objective, source of information in the area, what we would like to do and what we try to do is kind of uplift the area through information. So what we've decided is we can partner with the city, the school district, other organizations in the area to get the message out about programs, initiatives, ideas around schooling, around curriculum, specifically around programs is what I would think. Any new programs or initiatives that will come through the city or the school, we'll do our part to get that information out, give you guys, the who, what, when, where, why, so you guys know from the sources what will be taught to the students through the District 7 school district.
I'm on the superintendent's task force looking at the climate in the Edwardsville schools. All of a sudden, since the death of George Floyd, it appears that many of our communities have had an epiphany, recognizing that the history that we have been reading in our schools have not been inclusive of minorities. And so people are asking why this story isn't being told, why it's not shared. And I'm sure educators are looking at it now, trying to determine how to address the curriculum, since we all know that there aren't textbooks that have been written that share the generous contributions of minorities, African Americans, and others. Also, and this is not a commercial, Mayor Patton. When I became president of NAACP, I went to the superintendent of schools, and she was very generous in allowing the Edwardsville NAACP start a Black History context in 10 elementary schools. And during that period, we encouraged the schools to come up with information about African Americans and their contributions. Most of the things that we were hearing at first was about arts and sports. But since then, the program has matured, and we find out that African Americans have contributed in all walks of life in America. And we do give each elementary school $200 to purchase library materials, which we found that the libraries were lacking materials about African Americans. This year, we are going to donate $250 to each middle school and encourage them to purchase African American materials. We had Dr. Cornelia Smith working with us. She's done an excellent job in directing this program in the elementary schools. Thank you.
John, I know it's not a commercial, but I thought it was great news at the last NAACP meeting, the total number of members. Could you share that with the group that's listening today?
Our records indicate we have over 208 members in the NAACP, and that number is growing every time I go to the mailbox.
Good.
Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Okay, our next speaker is Steve. Steve, please. Steve, can you please unmute?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Steve Jackson. I'm the pastor of Mount George Church. And this whole thing we're going through, it's become aware to me. I've become aware that many of the African Americans who have been going through the things we're going through know that there's an issue, but many of the people who are not going through it don't know about it. And I was wondering if the possibility was there to have some active trauma training. There's some available, I know, where people can understand how other people are affected by their actions and understand how those actions affect people. I know they had some training down at the Jackie Joyner Kersey. I think it's about a 2-hour deal, but there's training out there on trauma, and they talk about shifting the lens and what trauma does to people and how the things we go through, the little innuendos, or it's just really a good training, and it would help people to understand and to look at the whole situation from the other guy's point of view. Because right now, I think there's a lot of concern by people who are not African Americans, but they really don't understand what the problem is. And that's probably the reason we're having this panel, to try to get some understanding. But some training in trauma, some trauma training. And I heard somebody talking about that they were, the background, it was a Jean in that area.
Yeah, that is. I'm a trauma counselor, and I'm really interested in what you're sharing about the program they have at the Jackie Joyner Kersey Foundation.
Well, it's not a program there. It's a program, some training that they had done there. And I can get the information on the people who actually did it, but there is training in trauma that will help. I think all the police need to have it, and all those who deal with the citizenry could benefit by having that kind of training.
I think it sounds like a great idea. I'm really interested in looking into that further. Thank you. Love the name of it if you could find that, but otherwise I'll look for it too. Thanks.
I'll have it in a minute. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker, Auntie. Auntie, go ahead and unmute and speak.
Hi, this is Elena Hiles, and I grew up in the Edwardsville Glen Carbon community as well. I'm very happy to be able to participate, and like others, thank you for moving down this path. It seems so far that the questions have kind of fallen into 2 categories. One being kind of economic barriers to people of lower income in the community, and then also cultural climate types of questions. So I have 2 quick questions there. On the economic barrier side, is there any subsidized daycare for low-income families so that people are able to work, or they're able to pursue an education that may provide better opportunities for themselves and their families? On the cultural climate side, when we talk about history, I think it would be very good for the community to have available a comprehensive analysis of the actual history of the Edwardsville area history as far as race and racial relations go. Because I think people are, for the most part, very unaware of what has happened in this area. And of course, that, you know, history provides the roots of where we are now. So I think things like understanding our own history, as well as, you know, Reverend Jackson pointing to the trauma training, the microaggressions that many people who don't face them are unaware that they're doing. I think they go hand in hand in opening the minds and hopefully changing behavior of people in the community. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Next speaker is Victoria. Victoria, please go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you for having this forum. This is Victoria Lottis. I live in Glen Carbon, and I'm a retired public educator who now teaches part-time at SIUE. My question is it possible to have a community read? In other words, is there a book that we could start with? It's just a very small beginning, but you could even have a children's book read and then a young adult book read but my husband and I have been reading so much in the past 4 or 5 weeks, and we're just kind of overloaded with information. But it would be so interesting for people to be reading some of the same books or even shorter articles or pamphlets, and then have arranged for discussion groups. Thank you.
I love that idea.
Jean, you might have had that idea earlier today in an email that you sent us. What was the book that you suggested for the community read?
How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram.
Okay.
I can't remember his full name right now, but that's one I read that I really liked and thought would be useful. But Victoria, I think you've got a great idea, and this adding young adult, maybe for children, sort of possibilities too, gets more full family involved in the possibilities and discussions, whether they be by Zoom or another way that we can get things figured out. I love this idea. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt Meacham. Matt, go ahead and unmute and you can speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this forum. I'm a program manager for statewide engagement with Illinois Humanities. I'm based in our Southwestern Illinois office, which is housed in the Manny Jackson Center for the Humanities here in Edwardsville. I'm really happy to hear all of the interest in sort of revisiting historical memory and recognizing the significance of historical memory, for interpreting current events and so forth. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we offer some modest grants that would be available to any local nonprofit organizations, libraries, museums, community organizations of any kind, really, that could support some of those kinds of activities. And in particular, I'll just mention one that's a relatively new grant opportunity that we have available called Activate History, which is specifically for public discussions of current events, current issues, and so on, that draw upon historical artifacts of some kind. And the information about that is available on our website, which is www.ilhumanities.org. And the next application deadline for that particular program is September 1st. So if any local organizations are interested in that grant opportunity to support some of the kinds of cultural discussions and activities that have been mentioned, we'd be more than happy to receive an application. And if I can answer any questions, I'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Matt, I'm very happy that you're on. I want to request or ask you to consider using your facility there at the Manny Jackson Center of the Humanities for a listen and learn session. We had like a miniature speaker series of individuals who have spent decades here in our community and are a wealth of knowledge. They could share their experiences and their knowledge with youth and other generations. A couple individuals come to mind. Herman Shaw. I think Herman might be on our talk tonight, and I've definitely enjoyed listening to his experiences. Manny Jackson, who's now writing a little bit for the Intelligencer in terms of editorial, and even somebody like Bill Hain. If you've ever been in the room with Bill Hain, his stories are just incredible. Being a Vietnam veteran, a state's attorney here at a very young age, and all the different experiences that he's had in his life. But I think that would be a wonderful opportunity to use the center that literally sits right in the heart of the history of Edwardsville. North Main Street is where it all began. But just a series, and maybe we could help coordinate that. We have the ability to have the Wildey Theater spaces used as well, but we can coordinate just some listen and learns, whether it's just coffee and Danishes or whether we do it over the lunch hour. But I think that would be a great idea if we could start that.
I'd be happy to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, our next speaker is Ed. Ed, please unmute and go ahead and speak. Ed, we are having issues hearing you. You can try to unmute and remute and unmute and then try again. Ed, we are still having issues. I would disconnect and then try to reconnect and raise your hand again. We'll get you on as soon as possible.
Any luck? Nothing? No?
We hear you now.
Well, that we hear.
Okay, great, good. Sorry about that. Okay, I guess I just wanted to ask a question about the kind of public forum we would have about this. I think that this is constructive, but I think that the notion of this being put to a vote would be a good idea. I think another thing that's kind of troubling about the whole matter is the lack of accuracy about it. 1817, Illinois was still a territory. It was not a state. And it was a vote that he vetoed, yes, on indentured servitude, not slavery. When he brought slaves here, he brought them from Kentucky to Illinois. Up until 1857 in Dred Scott versus Sanford, it was ruled consistently that a slave brought to a free state does not become free once he arrives in a free state. Now, there seems to be a lot of misinformation about this, and it seems like we're just buckling to a mob for no reason. When are we going to have any sort of actual two-sided, even, calm discussion about this without some sort of premise like, well, where will we move it? How will we get rid of it? It seems like we've already reached a conclusion before we've even had any conversation about it at all. And that's really shameful, actually, for a country that prides itself on free speech. That's my whole question. Are we going to have a vote or a proper debate?
Ed, I'll take that one as mayor. Obviously, I mentioned it last night. I'm in between a rock and a hard place because we have a lot of emotions on this issue. But I do believe, as you're saying, in democracy and good public speaking and public debate, an opportunity for a vote, either by the current elected officials or by the citizens. So we've mentioned to the groups how that can be done. You're right. The challenge of having a forum, is difficult when you're talking about a Facebook back and forth. I just asked at the meeting last night that we avoid the name calling, we avoid accusations, we keep it very factual and detailed. And so hopefully there will be a forum. I don't know about the rest of the committee members here. This wasn't what I had in mind in terms of what we were trying to achieve with this committee. We do want to listen and learn, but we want to propose policy to improve the relations and the services that the city of Edwardsville provides. This statue issue came up after we decided to form this. And I think, my recommendation is going back and asking some of the individuals who decided to put this statute, what were their decisions and what was their ideas of why this would be a good individual to have in a park in the central part of Edwardsville. I don't think people are being completely honest if they didn't know some of Ninian Edwards' history. Ninian Edwards, obviously the founder of the community, but we all knew, if you grew up here and you listen to the stories and you talk about the different relations with James Madison and Edward Coles and Stevenson. There's been a lot of I think misconceptions or just lack of clarity. I mean, we knew what the history was like back in the times. So yeah, will this ever come to a head? I'm not sure that this committee is the forum to do that, but I understand your desire to get the facts out.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess it's frustrating because there's this image painted of this man as though he was some sort of exceptionally awful person. And frankly, he was right on par for his time. We don't have any reason to destroy the other parts of our history that were right on par for their time, their history. Do we agree with what happened? No. But that doesn't mean that we go and tear it down because there's a mob. And that's what's wrong. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we no longer have any virtual hands raised. Please feel free on the bottom of your screen. You should see a virtual hand button, or if you're on a tablet or a smartphone, it might be a triple button that you might have to push for more. We have a few popping up. We do have a few written questions that we'll try to get to. So I'll go ahead and let Ezra speak. Ezra, you'll be next. So we'll allow Ezra to talk. Please unmute. Ezra, go ahead.
Community leadership in Edwardsville. So thinking about both elected officials as well as like department heads, but also specifically boards and commissions. I know that at the state level, they track gender and racial representation on boards and commissions. And I was wondering to what extent we track that or how we're doing in terms of community leadership.
I will tell you, Ezra, that that's something that we do not have a numerical tracking for. I accept recommendations and volunteers for all the boards and commissions. There are a few of them that, like the Board of Police and Fire Commission, we want to try to have a decent balance that represents the community. And we do on that one. We also have other committees that I think are important, like the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a good across-the-board spectrum. I'm not a believer in just somebody that's from the building background or the development background. I purposely appointed some females to that committee that I just know are good individuals that care about the community. And at first they were surprised. Some of the committee members were, what is the background? Why is this person participating in zoning or planning? Well, I think we should have a broad spectrum of representation. So if you have names of individuals that would like to serve on committees or commissions, I think there's availability on most of them currently. The only one that's been really a challenge to get people into is the library board. We had one library board position open, and I think I had 5 different highly qualified applicants wanting to volunteer for that board. And we were able to get a minority seated on the library board this last year, and happy with that. But yeah, I've got all the names of the boards and commissions. It's public information. It's in the mayor's office, and you're certainly able to look at that and talk with my administrative assistant about any openings that are currently available.
Our next speaker is Caryn Mefford. Caryn, go ahead, unmute and speak. Caryn, go ahead and unmute. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. Caryn, raise your hand again if you want to try again.
Mr. Mayor, can you see some of the questions in the Q&A?
I do have those questions to my right. And when we run out of hand raising, we can go through those. Or if you want me to take a couple of them now, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, why don't you, one in there about one of the commissions that you had from a
Sure.
Edwardsville?
Yes. Is the Human Relations Commission still a functioning committee? It looks like its mission is similar to this committee meeting tonight. And I can answer that for you, Ella. That commission has not had an active meeting during my term as mayor, nor for the prior 3 or 4 years before I came mayor. I did speak and had different relations with members that were on that committee. Paul Pitts and I have looked at the reformation of that committee. Unfortunately, I think when it was first set up, it was mainly filled with minorities from the African American community. And when Paul and I talked about rebuilding that, we wanted to include other minority positions, whether it be LGBT or whether that be churches, whether that be disabilities. So we had a goal of having that commission rebuilt with more inclusiveness, and it didn't get done yet, but that is on our mission statement, to have a sustained active committee looking at human relations. And so this committee that you're talking to now, that is one of our goals. And I'm I'm confident we'll get that accomplished.
Okay, we will move back to hands for a minute. Rachel, it is your turn to speak. Please unmute your mic. Rachel, go ahead and unmute and you can speak.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Hey, everybody, it's Rachel Tompkins. And I just wanted to go back to Reverend Jackson's concerns about trauma training. That might be something that can be arranged. And Jean and Hal, I just wanted to say that I'm a clinical psychologist in town. I'm going to be doing some trauma training in a women's shelter pretty soon. And I wondered if there's anything I can do to help, I'd be happy to work with you if that would be any help to you, Jean, and if that anything like that can be arranged. Anyway, thank you for the forum, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And Rachel, for example, is one of our committee members. She's on the Cool Cities Committee. She leads that committee and does a wonderful job on environmental resources and reuses. So thank you for offering your professional services as well.
Okay, our next speaker is Mary Grose. Mary, go ahead and speak.
Hi, I'm actually Jeffrey Scablo. I'm Mary's husband. We're listening in here together on her link. My question has to do with the location of these discussions. It seems to me a good idea to hold one or more of these, perhaps at the band shell by the library, somewhere outdoors. Not everybody has access to the internet or ability to connect with a Zoom discussion like this. And also some people like myself are older and in a vulnerable health group in our current circumstances, so less willing to enter, say, the Wildey or any such indoor place. So it seems to me an outdoor meeting of some kind would be as public as can be and would encourage the widest possible participation in a discussion of this kind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There is also the ability to call in off of any mobile or landline for future. We have quite a few people who have called in tonight on landline, but that is a good suggestion. Thank you. Next, we have Jody Cox. Jody, please unmute and you may speak.
Hello. I had a few comments and then a few suggestions. So I hope that we stay straight to our purpose, that while we're discussing people, Black and brown people, that we remember that they're people. We don't address them as minorities. That kind of objectifies a human. Also, while it's kind of a hallmark of the Black community that some of the Black communities are impoverished because of structural racism and institutionalized oppression, not all Black or brown people are impoverished. So, you know, that kind of is the reason why we're here, is that people have these assumptions. So we just want to keep the speech up, not just target a group thinking that they're all impoverished. I think a great place to start is making our institutions, our police department, our city hall, and the structure of our community reflect its population. So I think if we can get more people in those places of power who are Black or brown, and well as white, but if we can get more Black and brown people in those institutions, that would really be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay, next we have Herman Shaw. Herman, go ahead and unmute. Herman, you're still muted. Go ahead.
Okay, am I on now?
We can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to thank you for doing this, having this forum tonight, and giving us opportunity to at least get on record as having a thought or a part of what's going on in this community. Ella and I had talked yesterday about the Human Relations Commission, and I personally feel that a community like ours, we should have one, and it should be meeting constantly, because human relations are just as critical as a chamber of commerce. You know, to how we relate to each other is what our community should be all about. And my thought is that Edwardsville should be so structured that other communities around us should be coming to us and asking us, when there's a situation like we're in now, asking us, how do you do this? You know, because we should be all over this. We have so many brilliant, bright, and I mean GPs, I mean good people in this community, that there's no reason for us to find ourselves in the midst of this when something comes up in the community. We should be the first people to be able to know how to deal with this. So I'm just hoping that Hal, that you really get that Human Relations Commission together, and I would love to be a part of it, and let's get to work so that we can get things done. Now, you know, the Lincoln School has some literature. We have booklets that tell about the history of blacks in Edwardsville, but I just think that the history needs to be more in depth. It needs to be about not just the history of Edwardsville people. It needs to be the history of African American and brown people and the Indians in this country. And I think that's what the young people are talking about, and they want to know what happened, and they want to know what we're going to do about it from this point forward. And so I just think that we need to get that Human Relations Committee together, and let's get to work.
Thank you, Herman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Mary Grose, did you have another question, another addition? You may go ahead and speak, Mary.
Yeah, hi, this is Mary Grose again. Thank you. So my question is about whether there are mechanisms, or if there could be mechanisms to bring students, you know, high school, university students, in so that they can understand what it's like to be in the workforce here. Whether it's, you know, following a committee in the city council, you know, working with Brittany in the newspaper or in a business, you know, just so that we have students that are feeling comfortable in various places in the city. The Edwardsville Library or Children's Museum, there are all kinds of places where, you know, they might be able to have a limited, but, you know, a rewarding experience, and may choose to continue in that field or live here. It's just an idea that I was wondering if something could be done along those lines.
Thank you, Mary. I can tell you that we have partnered with SIUE on a couple different avenues. One is the Destination Committee, where we bring students in, pair them up with some of our appointed officials, whether it be a fire chief, police chief, or city engineers. That's one of the sources that we use to hire interns. We also partnered with them last year to study 3 different areas of Edwardsville. One was parking, one was a teen center, and the other one was called Earth Edwardsville on the environment. So we do engage the SAU students, and we have good relations and good opportunities to interact with people of different backgrounds from SIU. So that's one aspect. I know there is a plan in the works right now to partner with District 7 to have more summer job opportunities available to District 7 students. And that would, I think, be, you know, a great focus to get them working with some of our union laborers, for example, or again, with some of our firefighters. There's an Explorers program that gets to shadow firefighters, and that would be a wonderful opportunity to bring people in and get them interested in the profession. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stanley. Stanley, please unmute and begin speaking.
Thank you. Stanley Huddleston. The comment on the education, if the community didn't know this, back in 1995, the school district was in the 100 top schools in the nation for its educational learning. And it just didn't come from, it took the whole students and the education and the administration to make this happen. So on that point, we do have smart black and white students. So to make this good, we should add in the curriculum for both of them, because this just didn't happen on just one part of the education. It was a whole community that made our school system 100 in the top nation of the schools. And also, we were also elected the best special education in the state of Illinois. So we have a very great community, and so we need to come together as intelligent minds and work this out together, because we're a smart community. So we shouldn't have all this chaos going around with misconception about who is what and who got this or who's there or whatever. And so that's what I have for tonight, and thank you for my time.
Stanley, are you still there?
Yes.
Could I ask you if you have any specific recommendations or things that you know were happening then that we would want to try to reproduce or get going again, or improve upon?
I did do time at the high school as a study hall supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And my motto was, in the study hall, this is the hall of knowledge. If you don't know it, ask, because you have all these smart people around you. If you don't know anything, ask. And I think that's why we had an excellent school system here, because we had everybody working together. It wasn't divided. So we need to come back together, because all the divide between the race, and well, the white and black had to help each other to make our school system be in the top 100 in the nation. This wasn't long by themselves. So we had to have something going on at the time to make this happen, to be the 100 top school in the nation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a question online. This one is from Ashley Schoen. And can anyone speak to the training or educational panel members have on anti-racism? Further, is city leadership investing in educational tools, training, or resources on anti-racism, racial bias for themselves and employees? I can tell you that yes, we have all had racial bias training. Every city employee has had that within the last year, and we are investing in those tools. We are talking with the city council about possibly a hiring that would be in the area of a diversity director that will also work on these sorts of things that you mentioned here, Ashley. In terms of specific training of our educational panel, I would probably say that the most trained would be Jean in her background of mental health and trauma. I know that John in education and his years of service to the students and different school districts, plus being president of the NAACP. And then Brittany comes to us from Hazelwood, and she was invited to be on the panel, not only to make sure that this was open and transparent, but just because a new person in town, what was her experiences like? She's obviously a high-level professional that we value her opinion. So my position, twice elected as mayor, I've done a lot to try to improve the community. And as I've apologized for in the recent meetings, that, you know, my focus was not as Herman would like it to be on the Human Relations Committee. I worked hard to make this community as successful as possible for every person, and thought, you know, we were moving forward in terms of job opportunities, in terms of the housing quality improving. We work on streets, but it didn't take long for me to look at ratio of city employees of different ethnic backgrounds and know it didn't match the same as the city population. And so we're going to work harder at recruiting good candidates and recruiting people for those positions to improve that statistic. But I think that's the best I can do at answering that question. Did any other panel members have anything to contribute along those lines?
I'll take a shot at making an observation. This pandemic put us in a position where, with the death of George Floyd, we can look inward at ourselves. And you have to determine if you like what you see. That's why this committee exists, is asking citizens of Edwardsville, with respect to race, do we like what we see? What I believe is true is we have not, as citizens of our country, been courageous enough to address this issue. And had it not been for such an unusual climate, the death of George Floyd may have gone unknown, just like the many lynchings and other people that have been killed, Black people. America didn't understand, didn't want to accept what Black people were saying about Black Lives Matter. We were trying to make one point. When our citizenship has been injured, especially by death, and we have to turn to the courts for relief and to adjudicate the situations which seem obvious with respect to death, that the person perpetrated a crime on an innocent person and nothing was done in the past. And that opened up many other areas for us to look at this time, how the hiring practices are done. Let's tear away the myth that all the racism is below the Mason-Dixon line. That's not true. The histories that people are asking for and learning now were not written for a reason. And so Edwardsville is hearing dialogue from what some people might call extremes. The protests that came here may not be directed particularly at our city, but we are the county seat. People will come here to express their grievances not only about Edwardsville, but about actions of the county and state and the country. We've been fortunate that these groups have been peaceful, but there are people who are angry and injured. So when the mayor takes time to give us a chance to talk about what concerns us and to talk to each other and to seek some solutions which are going to come later. They won't come by standing out there in the sun, but they certainly demand that you respond to crowds gathering like this. So the attitudes that exist, the training that people believe they should have, are targeted at changing the status quo. And if those people who sit in those seats take the training and brush it over and continue to govern in the way they have in the past, you won't see much change in Edwardsville. Things will look the same. And my feeling about it is, for whatever reason, African Americans are not participating in the governance of our community. I don't have the answers I'm seeking. Thank you
Okay, our next speaker is Steve. Steve, feel free to unmute.
Hal kind of mentioned this, and John Cunningham just covered this, but I've been around Edwardsville a little while, and some 35 years ago, I think it was, we made a big stink about the hiring of minorities, African Americans, in the same proportion as they appear in the population. Now, there has been some improvement, but it doesn't take 35 years to accomplish that. And my point is, some people would say, well, there's no problem. Well, but if the problem is not negatively affecting you and your children, then it's easy not to see it. And America has had to look at some ugly stuff that people of color have had to live with. And the window is open at this point, and many years, and many times people don't say anything, they don't express anything, but that doesn't mean that there are no issues. Some things we just shrug our shoulders and go on. But I would hope that Edwardsville would be proactive, and there are grants out there with assistance to have low-income if you want low-income people. Edwardsville has not sought anything like that to increase the housing. So we really kind of do as well as we want to do. And many times we just respond to the pressure and do enough to get the pressure off and don't really do what needs to be done to make it the way it needs to be. And I'm not attacking anybody. I'm not sure if Hal was even around when we talked about the mural and we talked about the housing and those kind of things. But this is not a new issue. But it's not an issue that has been fully addressed and fully accounted for. And maybe it's a good time to go ahead and get some of those things done the way they should be done. Thank you.
Steve, I appreciate that comment. That's excellent input, actually. Yeah, I had heard years ago, I mean, probably 10, 20 years ago, there was a big push against Section 8 housing or low-income housing, and I know those are not the same thing. But we did have a project recently approved in an older neighborhood of Edwardsville that did qualify for low-income housing credits. There was some pushback from that particular area of town not wanting the project, and I worked with the developer, I worked with Walt Williams and with the county and making sure the credits were available. It is currently under construction, and I think it's going to be a beautiful addition to our community. What they're looking for are properties that are on the bus line. So they're on the main corridors coming into town near grocery stores and other services. So it is somewhat challenging finding affordable properties that meet some of those qualifications. So when this site, the old Anna Henry nursing home, came up and was for sale, we were excited to have the quality of development that came, and the fact that I think there's 30 or maybe 35 units that are designated specifically for low income. I've got a question online here. We're waiting for another hand to come up. This is from Michelle Hoover. The Black community may benefit from a small business hub outside of the university. I can say, Michelle, I would agree with you on that. Something that Walt Williams and I, our economic development director, are looking at. Just recently, he put together a list of businesses that are owned by minorities of all different backgrounds. And so one of the things we talked about, and John, if I could, Cunningham, you came really close to saying exactly why I formed this commission. I was sitting here at the city at a couple occasions and looked out at the county courthouse steps and saw 500 to 800 people there with signs and with passion and with the desire to make some change. As the leader of the community, I have stepped up and said, let's listen, let's get them to come in and tell us what they're experiencing and what their recommendations are. Give us some best practices, some things that we can do better. But no, I would agree, going back to Michelle's comment, that anything we can do to support businesses and to get that center open, giving them access to banking that would help them on the financial end, giving them access to successful entrepreneurs that are willing to mentor them. That would be fantastic, because it is very, very difficult for a minority business to get going here in Edwardsville. There's cost challenges and there's customer challenges as well. We talked about, when you're in a community that's, you're only representative of 10% of the people, it's difficult for you to get enough customers and to have that niche and that location. We've had some very successful business owners here that are minorities, but we could use more. And so I think that business incubator is a really good idea.
Our next speaker is Mr. and Mrs. Lott. Please go ahead, unmute and speak.
Hi, I just wanted to go back to something that John and Steve touched on about the Black community, and is that everyone needs to realize that there's a good amount of fatigue within the Black community around issues of racial equality and anti-oppression and anti-racism. I'm 56 years old, and I never would have imagined that I would still have to be fighting the battles that my parents and my grandparents fought. So when we're discussing these issues, everyone needs to remember that for Black people and non-Black people of color, these discussions are not going to be fully intellectual and academic. There's going to be an emotional component for people of color because of the history of what we have gone through and of repeatedly having to say the same things over and over again. So I just wanted to make that people aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Edward Wooten. Edward, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for your time. I went to high school here back when Mr. Huddleston was speaking of, and graduated in '95. When we first moved here, we lived in an area back in Cottonwood. Little did I know, once I enrolled in school, a couple of kids asked me where I did live. When I told them Cottonwood, they said, "Oh, you live in Cotton Hood." I said, "What does that mean?" They said, "Well, that's where all the Black people live." Didn't know that, like I said, until I spoke with another student. Since then, I've moved out of Edwardsville and then moved back. Majority of the people that I've went to high school with are still here. The challenges that I've seen, even before George Floyd, and there's many more other than George Floyd, but I don't see, like another speaker said before, the representation is not in the community. And I just think as far as the college, the high schools, there should be more representation. Some of the African-American workers that I've seen in restaurants are always in the back. I rarely see them as bartenders, as servers, and I think that would help drive or encourage some of the African-American students of SIUE and in the community to continue to, spend the dollar in the community. Also in banking, I don't see the last bank that I was a part of, I closed my account due to lack of diversity. And when the gentleman asked me why I was closing my account, I told him, I said, well, I don't see a lot of diversity. And I've been to a few branches just in town, and I've never seen anyone of color. And he just acknowledged, he understood. The bank that I moved to, when I first walked in, the first person I saw at the branch was a person of color. And I know a gentleman just said that the window is open right now. What I would say is that the window's always been open. If you if that's something you're willing to do. There's plenty of, I don't think there's any excuse why there should not be more diversity in the community. And I think that would also help with the students of SIUE of color, Black and brown, to stick around after graduation. And that'll also, I think, drive the community and get back to where, one of the top places to live. I just wanted to I know a lot has been said, a lot of good things have been said. I think where we are still missing is that we have a lot of neighbors that could be more friendly to their other neighbors. I have neighbors of mine who walk past me and I speak and they don't speak. They don't return it. And I just think if more people in the community are neighborly with each other, then some of these problems may go away. But it's going to, until we address that issue, along with some of the others that's been mentioned tonight, then like the last speaker said, then this is going to continue to be an issue. And I just think with everyone uniting, that we can be one of the communities like this, like one of the other speakers said, that can lead by example. Thank you.
I had a question online here. This is from an anonymous attendee. Can you explain why Edwardsville does not currently have a train to and from St. Louis? I've heard there was an opportunity in the past to do so, and the city turned it down because of the desire not to be connected to the city. I've been in government here in Edwardsville for 24 years, whether city council or Madison County Board, and mayor for 7. And I am not aware of any serious attempt. There was a ballot initiative at one point, and I think it was put out, possibly, I could be wrong, by MCT to see if there was a desire to raise taxes to be able to pay for that. That type of transportation is extremely expensive on the front end. I think it was voted down. I would like to look into that question further. I know we have currently the director of MCT is one of our city aldermen, S.J. Morrison, and I'd ask S.J. To chime in on that access. I know one of the things that he does work very hard on, and MCT does an excellent job on, is bringing workers to the Gateway Commerce Center for employment. We have nearly 7,000 people that work in Edwardsville at the Gateway Commerce Center. Obviously, the vast majority of them coming from other communities. So those jobs, when they first started, it might have been a $10 warehouse job, but with the competition down there, with Amazon coming in, now it's $12, $14 an hour with benefits. But there are also other facilities like Worldwide Technology. And if you ever have an opportunity to visit there, you will walk in and you will see a very diverse workforce, a very young workforce, and a very well-paid workforce. Worldwide Technology employs nearly 800 employees in our Gateway Enterprise Zone. And best part of that story is a minority-owned business. Thank you.
So we currently do not have any guest participants with their hand up. So if there's anybody else who would like to address the group, please do so now. Okay, we have one, Ms. Hindi. I will allow you to speak now. Please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laika Hindi. I was at the last meeting. I'm an educator, not in the district, but I am in East St. Louis District, Lincoln Middle School. I guess after our meeting last week, I was just kind of driving around Edwardsville, and I saw the Columbus School, and I'm sorry, I don't know if this was already mentioned or not. I was at work late tonight, so, but like I said, I was driving around Edwardsville and I saw the Columbus School, and I had a flashback because I went to SIUE where I took a Native American Studies class, and I distinctively remember my teacher being so upset that her daughter, as a Native American, had to go to the Columbus school, who we should all know was not a good man, should not be celebrated. And I'm all for not erasing history. That's not what I'm saying at all, but just not to make him out to be a hero. And there are plenty of states around, turning it into Indigenous Peoples Day and different things like that instead of Columbus Day. I'm wondering why the city of Edwardsville hasn't changed the name of the school, and is that in the works?
Any committee members have any knowledge of that? I mean, that obviously that is a school district facility. It's ran by the school district, and the school board would be the appropriate channel to bring that concern to. But has anybody heard of any activities in that regard, John? No. We'll ask the question for you, Leica. We are going to share this information from tonight's meeting with the school district, and we're going to partner with them on several other activities. But in terms of that particular building and even curriculum, those things are going to be driven by the school board. Thank you.
Appreciate that question, though. Hadn't heard that idea before. Makes sense, though, to consider.
Okay, our next speaker is Mr. or Mrs. Lott. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Jeff Lott, and going back to the Metrolink issue just for a moment here. I grew up in North St. Louis County back in the 60s and 70s, and I know at that time, I think it was the 70s, when Metrolink was starting to get underway and reaching out, there was a huge pushback on it going from some of the different areas out to the West County, and I don't know if it coming out here was part of that, but there was a pushback because they didn't want Black people going to all these different areas. That was going to bring all the riffraff and bring crime and all this stuff. So there was a larger issue in terms of bringing rail to different, connecting up the communities. So like I said, I don't know the exact history of what happened here. I would suspect there was some of that kind of undercurrent and pushback. And, but I mean, it's a much larger issue than just, kind of the local, whether it's traffic or whatever, so.
I did see an online question in regards to getting notification out sooner than what this individual heard about this particular forum. We will be meeting immediately after this, the panel will, and we'll be discussing the success of tonight's forum and whether this is a better environment than the Wildy or a public gathering. We also heard this evening of having one possibly at the bandstand in the future. We will take all that into consideration and let the majority of the panel decide. But we will hopefully make a decision this evening, and that therefore, when an article comes out about this this evening's content, or if we put it on our website, we'll be able to get that on as soon as possible, hopefully before the end of this week, because we are planning on having another meeting next Wednesday. Is that correct? Or
Tuesday afternoon.
Tuesday afternoon. Okay. Thank you, Jean.
Okay, our next speaker is Jerry Lippold. Jerry, please go ahead, unmute and speak.
Did it unmute?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's Karen Zimmerman. My husband is Jerry Lippold. And I just wanted to share some experiences I've had in Edwardsville, which could possibly explain why I've been such a, shall we say, passionate advocate for some investment in the north part of the city in Edwardsville. I spent 10 years of my life in the military, and actually spent more because I grew up in the military. And it was an integrated environment, people of color. We all had a common mission, even as children, our parents did, and we didn't see each other as different colors. We just saw each other as people. I've also had the privilege, if you will, of serving in Washington, D.C. with the Agency for International Development. And my workforce there had 200 people that I was responsible for providing guidance and leadership to. And they were of basically all Americans, but of various different, people of color, different races and nationalities. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. In coming to Edwardsville, my eyes got opened. I lived outside of Edwardsville, but my eyes got opened when the mural got put up at the Lincoln School. And that initiative, and I started looking at what is going on here. And subsequent to that, I bought a little building on Main Street. And I've had the opportunity that people stop, people of color, white people, etc., and they talk to you. And I've heard things in Edwardsville that absolutely, I was shocked that the words were coming out of people's mouths, particularly a lot of the white people in Edwardsville, where the Manny Jackson Center for Humanities was referred to as the black magnet of what do we want those kids from Madison and Venice coming into our town for? With respect to interracial relationships, there was a murder/suicide where some of the responses from some of the white people that I don't really know, but they stop and talk. And it's interesting to see when you ask people of their true opinions, they like to talk and they talk. And it was, well, that's what you get when you've got blacks and whites mixing. And it was like, what? I've had the opportunity to interact with black people, a young man about 20 at Lowe's. And I said, well, do you feel any racial type things in Edwardsville? And he said, oh yeah. And he said, oh, in high school, yeah, I was called the N-word. I said, really, what'd you do? He goes, well, there was a teacher standing there when it happened. I said, so what'd you do? He said, I basically punched the guy in the face. And I said, well, what did the teacher do? He said, well, nothing, but he didn't stop me. And so, when people say microaggression in Edwardsville, coming from a military background and, one that's got a little more, I guess, international exposure, it is like going back 40 years in time from the standpoint of how people of color are viewed. I've heard people be called them. Oh, this place is getting to be just like, I'm just giving you some anecdotes. This place is getting to be just like Fairview Heights. I said, oh, you mean all the shops and everything? No, them. I've heard people of color be called Canadians. People talk in code. And I mean, you try to educate them, but there's a level of underlying ignorance in the city that is they assume that if you're, well, I have white hair now, but when you're blonde, blue-eyed, that it's an automatic okay to say whatever you want. But it's the feelings that are expressed. And so when you see the passion I express for the Manny Jackson Center for Humanities, and really the city and the county investing in the north part of town, that's where it's coming from. I've talked at the county level. It's not just at the city level. At the county level, I talked to a county official that I was talking to him, probably one of the highest ones you can get. And I tried to explain the concept of equal opportunity, equal employment opportunity. And as God is my witness, he said, well, we hired a black guy. We're compliant. And I had to explain to him how that is not equal opportunity employment. So there is an underlying level of ignorance, and this is how we've always done it, that, I believe in investment in the older parts of town. I see Edwardsville has left property taxes of $100 million worth of property on the table because of some of the policies and the way the city is growing, the direction. And I just don't understand that concept of leaving some of the older parts of town. I just can't wrap my head around it. But I understand, you know, when I go home to my hometown of 15,000, I understand some of the concepts of some people have never left town and the city they grew up in. And so they're not really understanding the bigger picture. Manny Jackson came in, and then I'll just put this, and he had a huge vision. Coming from a background of international development and the military, his vision was big. His vision was outreach to huge corporations and leveraging his position and what he had overcome and his achievements to really bring something to Edwardsville and to really have, I don't want to say this so I insult anybody, but people that really understand how this all works. Some of the most brilliant minds in the world is what he wanted to do. And it's still sitting there. And when somebody just, after a while, you just stop fighting. You just stop. You just go, you know what? I'm beating a dead horse. And so all of that opportunity with respect to race and the conversations at the highest level got lost somewhere with Manny Jackson and all the investment in that he was going to bring. That's what I see. And I don't have the answers because I've been trying, but you know, after a while you just say, you know what? I give up. After 7 years, I give up. And so I just wanted to put out there, but there is an awful lot of underlying, I'll use misunderstandings. I'll use Manny's words, misunderstandings. And, you know, 60 years after
Caryn,
he overcame some of it, I'll shut up, Hal. It's fine. I just wanted to let you know where I'm coming from. And the racial stuff is alive and well in Edwardsville. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions or any hands raised. Does the committee members have any comments or input at this point? Okay. Well, let's basically go into recess.
We have one more. Steve, would you like to go ahead and speak?
Yes. You know, I want to thank the last caller for exposing some things that I would never hear, but that are there. And it's kind of, I study people, and I know that some of you are very uncomfortable with what she was saying, but it's true. And the only way we can ever correct things is accept the truth about ourselves and about our society. But what she was saying is so true, and it's evidenced by some of the voting choices we make, things like that. But if it's going to change, it's got to be on purpose. Not going to happen, no matter how much push you get, unless you really want to, you're not going to. But I want to thank that lady because she exposed what we feel. And thank you for having the meeting.
Okay. All right. I think that concludes the input for this evening. I want to thank everybody that participated. Certainly, we got a lot of good notes and some good ideas. So we'll basically adjourn into a panel meeting here. And thank you all. Devin will get the word out on the next event. I've got a note here, maybe using the Glen Ed Do Good or Ed Glen Nonprofit Coalition Facebook page. So we'll get that information out to that as well. Thank you.